The weight of the heart. Elias had always been the kind of person who felt everything intensely. Growing up in Montreal, he was known among friends as the one who cried during animated movies, laughed too loudly at small jokes, and carried the sadness of strangers as if it were his own. He never considered his sensitivity a flaw, but the world often made him believe otherwise. By the time he reached his 30s, he had become a quiet, introspective man, working as a therapist who guided others through emotions he still struggled to understand in himself. His office overlooked a busy street, yet inside it he maintained a calm, warm atmosphere. People often told him they felt safe with him, a compliment that both comforted and pressured him. He wished he could feel as safe with himself. Although he spent his days helping others articulate their emotions, Elias often failed to express his own. His empathy was vast, but it came with a cost. He absorbed every feeling like a sponge. Some nights, he returned home so emotionally saturated he couldn't even name what he felt. One cold autumn morning, a new patient named Clara entered his office. She was quiet, elegant, and visibly anxious. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a notebook. "I can't control my feelings," she said during their first session. "I feel too much, and when I do, I shut down." Elias listened, recognizing himself in her confession more than he admitted. He encouraged her to write her thoughts between sessions, hoping the practice would help her see patterns in her emotional landscape. Over the weeks, Clara's vulnerability grew, and so did Elias's understanding of her. She was a musician who had lost her ability to perform after a panic attack on stage. She spoke about joy as if it were a fragile secret, and sadness as if it were a familiar guest. Slowly, Elias began to admire her emotional courage, something he rarely attributed to himself. In helping her untangle her feelings, he was forced to confront the silence he'd built around his own heart. One day, after a particularly intense session, Clara handed him a page from her notebook. "This isn't about me," she said softly. "It's about you." Shocked, he read her words, "You listen to emotions but don't let them speak." The sentence cut through him with uncomfortable truth. For the first time in years, Elias felt exposed, not professionally, but personally. His instinct was to distance himself, yet he found himself unable to ignore the clarity of her insight. That evening, walking home through streets filled with yellow leaves, Elias felt emotions he had long avoided: sadness, fear, longing, but also a faint spark of hope. He realized he had become so used to carrying others' pain that he had forgotten how to carry his own. He sat on a park bench and allowed himself to cry, not for any particular reason, but simply because he needed to. The release shocked him. It felt like discovering a hidden room inside himself. In the following sessions, Elias was different. He didn't share his personal struggles, therapists rarely do, but he listened with a more open heart. Clara noticed the change. "You seem lighter," she said one morning. "As if you can breathe again." Elias smiled, appreciating how emotions, when acknowledged, became less frightening. His work with Clara shifted from treating fear to restoring trust, the kind a person must have within themselves before they can fully live. Months later, Clara performed again for the first time since her breakdown. She invited Elias to her small concert in a cozy cafe across the river. At first, he debated whether attending crossed a professional line, but something inside him knew that witnessing her reclaim her voice would also help him reclaim his own. The night of the concert, the cafe was lit with soft golden lamps, and Clara approached the stage with visible trembling hands. When she began to play, her music was raw and honest, imperfect but deeply human. Every note carried the weight of her journey. Elias listened, feeling tears rise again, but this time they carried gratitude instead of pain. As the final note faded, the audience erupted in applause. Clara looked at him briefly, and in that glance, Elias felt the profound exchange of emotions that words could never capture. After the concert, they spoke briefly outside. "Thank you," Clara whispered, "for helping me feel again." Elias responded gently, "You did that yourself. I only walked beside you." She smiled, then turned back toward the cafe, leaving Elias alone with the realization that emotions, even the most difficult ones, were not burdens but guides. Over the next year, Elias continued to confront his internal world with honesty. He journaled every night, identifying feelings he had once buried under rational explanations. He took long walks without headphones, allowing thoughts to rise naturally. He even joined a local poetry group, not to perform but to listen, and eventually, to speak. With each small act, he reclaimed parts of himself he had long silenced. One evening, he wrote in his journal, "Feeling deeply is not a weakness. It is a form of courage the world often forgets to recognize." Rereading the words, he realized he had finally understood something essential: emotions are not obstacles but invitations to understand one's humanity more fully. Years later, when Elias looked back on his life, he didn't measure it by success or failure, but by the moments he had allowed himself to feel genuinely. In those moments, both joyful and painful, he had found truth, connection, and a sense of peace he once believed impossible. In the end, he understood that the heart is not meant to be silent. It is meant to speak, tremble, break, heal, and expand. And when he finally embraced that truth, he discovered something extraordinary. The more he accepted his feelings, the more he understood others and himself.